everyone, welcome to our YouTube channel. So till now we have discussed so many different things in Indian literature. We discussed about the number of novelists, the number of poets. Let us start with another literature. Let us talk about America this time. So in American literature, we all know that there are number of different periods in American literature as well. जैसे आपके British literature में different periods हैं, American literature में भी कुछ periods हैं. So we can divide the entire American literature into various parts, like the Puritan era, जब सबसे पहले Puritan forefathers आते हैं, Puritan era जो थे हमारे पास, then the age of reason, Romanticism, we have the Transcendentalism, Realism, Modernism, the contemporary period. The contemporary period is going to talk about the postmodern writers that are there. So these are the various periods, and in our classes we will divide and study the number of writers that are correspondent to a particular era that we have or a particular group that we have. So we will be talking about how Columbus found out America. And was he the first one to found out America? Definitely not. Yes, he is coming and he is the one who saw the piece of land America where plantation can happen, where the British people can colonize this land America, the virgin city, the virgin place, which they thought can be captured by them. Or ye to, because Adam and Eve are fallen people, it was like a place that they got to live. The Puritan fathers thought that it is the place where they can create their own new life. So it was the New England that they found. But it was not Christopher Columbus who found out the Americas. Definitely there were some Red Indians, some people from Portuguese and other Europeans that were already there. Right? So these are the few things that we will talk when we talk about the American literature in our classes. But today in this video, let us talk about very important writers that are related to realism, and let us also talk about the realistic period, the realistic writings or the realism period in the American literature, because this is a period where a lot of important writers are there, like Mark Twain, and Mark Twain called this time period as the Gilded Age as well. So let us in this video talk in greater detail about the realism in American literature and the writers associated with realism writings. So realism जब period आएगा, उसके साथ साथ naturalism is also there. So in the course of the video, we'll also talk about realism and naturalism, two literary movements or two very important isms that became very important. Time period is from 1865 till 1915. So this is the glorious time period when the America became extremely rich, when it was the industrialized period, when people were becoming rich and of course everyone was running after money. Now the important industrialist people were more and more rich and the planters were becoming poorer and poorer. So we see that in the Civil War period, so during the Civil War, we had the nation being divided into two parts, the North and the South. That was the Civil War. In the northern part, there were the industrialist people, and in the southern part, there were what? There were the planters who had the Africans and they were the slaves there. So these planters were forcing the Africans to work on the plantation works, the plantation houses that were there, right? So what is happening? We see Abraham Lincoln fighting for the people, and there would be the civil war between the northern states and the southern states, and of course northern states would win and the slavery would be abolished. So this is the time period called as the Civil War. Then of course there will be transcendentalist writers like Walt Whitman, Theodore, who will become very, very important, and they will write poetry during this time. Walt Whitman is a transcendental writer who is going to write realistic writings. So after this, after the Civil War, when we will have important works like Leaves of Grass or Oh Captain, My Captain, the period of realism will come to a heightened sense. So हमारा realistic period या realism as a movement became very important after the Civil War in America. So after Civil War, after Reconstruction period, after America was changing, एक पीरियड आता है जब इंडस्ट्रीज बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट हो जाएंगी. एक्चुअली अमेरिका अपने आप में एक बहुत रिच कंट्री भी बन जाएगा. एवरीवन वांटेड टू कम हियर, सेटल, अ लॉट ऑफ माइग्रेशन विल आल्सो इंक्रीज. So population of the American states was growing rapidly during the time of the realism movement. Then the science, industry and transportation all were expanding. There are a number of different instances that you read. You'll realize that industries itni zyada strong ho gayi thi that everyone wanted to achieve what? They wanted to just become very wealthy. So this innate power of a person who is very rich, that was the ideology in every person there. Literature was also growing, but most new writers were not romanticists or the transcendentalists. The transcendentalists were talking about the communion of the soul and the self. तो वो बोलते थे we are all one, we are all children of God and we can just create a whole unified self. So that was what the transcendentalist people or the poets were talking about. Also the romantics were only focusing more on the various natural movements or the nature that was there. They were now realists. They were talking about the reality, whether it is gruesome or whether it is totally good. So as industries were going on, definitely there will be problems and tussles between the have and the have-nots. There were some rich section people who were now creating problems for the working class people. So there were unions, the trade unions started to come up. There were different people talking about the meager pay that they were getting. So जिस तरीके से इंग्लैंड में बॉटम्स जैसी अलग अलग एरियाज आने लगे थे एंड पीपल वर फाइटिंग फॉर देयर ओन राइट्स, सिमिलरली अमेरिका में भी एक ऐसा टाइम पीरियड आता है जहां पे रियलिज्म मूवमेंट स्टार्टेड एंड द राइटर्स आर एसोसिएटेड टू द रियलिस्टिक पोर्ट्रेयल ऑफ देयर ओन कल्चर. दैट इज द रियलिस्टिक मूवमेंट. The aftermath of the Civil War meant that the Americans were less certain and optimistic about the future. So as they achieved, then after the Civil War, as they achieved such important thing like independence, right? The slavery was abolished. They thought that everything is possible. So they were highly optimistic about the future. Idealism of the romantics and philosophy of the transcendentalists seemed to be very out of date and out of fashion, out to date thing that they can remember. It was now very irrelevant to many readers. They wanted a new trajectory. They wanted a new way of thinking. The truth was tested by its usefulness of practical consequences. So now they said that they will judge the truth. They will see that whatever the other theorists or the other previous generation people were talking about, is it even true or not? The truth is a commodity accessible to the surface of things and we need to look at the truth in deeper level. It's perceptible to the sense and verified through the experience. So इनके लिए क्या important हो गया था? Experience became more important. Empiricism became more important. In fact, radical empiricism became important. Okay. Then the permanent truth that exerts apart from the material world. They were talking about the mind of the God, Plato's ideas of form. Everything was discussed in America as well. And we have William James who became very famous. So William James, Henry James ke hi brother hai. Henry James has written so many important works in the period of realism. So he is a very, very important writer. But when it comes to his brother was a philosopher. And he gave us the philosophy of radical empiricism. Radical empiricism क्या होता है? We are all nothing but small blocks of people and we are tapping on the various experiences that are happening. So John Locke as well as Hume already said, they talked about these things. So Hume and John Locke said that हम लोग born कैसे होते हैं? Tabula rasa के साथ born होते हैं and experiments हमें shape करते हैं. लेकिन radical empiricism के बारे में बात करेंगे विलियम जेम्स when he will say that there are small experiences and each experience you do not look at the experience only in a factual manner, while look at it in a very deeper manner. When two events happen in your life, they can be connected with dots and these dots that connect it are also relevant. These are your values, these are the various things that external influences that are coming towards you. That is also very important. So look at the dual ship that keeps on going. Practical experiences, events are important, but how you can connect them are also important. So this is something that William James said. He also talked about stream of consciousness, which of course Virginia Woolf is going to use in the later novels like Mrs. Dalloway. So ये कुछ important चीजें हैं that you have to remember and ये realism movement के साथ ही आती हैं. So then we have William James. William James was the father of American psychology and he talked about radical empiricism as I told you. So now let us talk about realism a little bit more. So from the social changes came two literary movements that became very famous. The first was realism. When we talk about realism, there were writers who were talking about the local color movements, जिसे हम और क्या बोल सकते हैं, regionalism. So जितने भी writers थे उस time पे, like we have Kate Chopin, then we have writers like Charlotte Perkins Gilman. All of them are related to certain kind of different region. तो वो कुछ region specific writings लिख रहे थे. For example, Mark Twain Mississippi River के आसपास की plantation के बारे में लिख रहे हैं. तो यहाँ पे हर कोई अपने रीजन, अपने डायलेक्ट, अपने तरीके से लिख रहा है. As it is like a salad bowl. America was like a salad bowl. So many different, from different areas people are living here. So everyone is going to talk about their own region. So यहाँ की literature in the realistic time period और in the realism कैसी थी, वहाँ पे वो local color movement के साथ associate हो जाती है. That was the regionalism associated novels. Then we have naturalism. Now naturalism is one step harsher than realism. In realism we portray the reality as it is. Like Frank Norris. We have writers like so many different writers that we'll be talking about, like Mark Twain as well. So they are directly talking about the society that they are living in. So this is realism. But when we talk about naturalism, we go one step further. We will talk about the internal human qualities and how we are always fighting with the nature. How human ki natural instincts can be in dichotomy with the external forces. So that is naturalism. That is one step harsher than realism. Then they were talking about romance. Romance became very important. It was inspired to, they were inspired by various ideologies. They were talking about the vulgar details of the life. They had the potential. They were talking about the pure life. And realism movement ke saath saath, they were in the realism movement, they were talking about the vulgarities of the life, and they were talking about how the life is such a how this world is becoming such pathetic place to live in. So it was grounded in the belief that there is an objective reality which can be portrayed with truth and accuracy as a goal. The writer does not select facts in accord with preconceived ideas, but rather sets down observations impartially and objectively. So writers facts create नहीं करता, लेकिन अपनी observations लिखता है. This is what Henry James will also say in his very important works. So realism as a movement was grounded in the belief that you will portray the life as it is. So realism was nothing but a reaction against romanticism. वो क्या था? Reaction था against romanticism. And this is what William Dean Howells also said. Nothing more and nothing less than the truthful treatment of material is called as realism. And why is he so famous? William Dean Howells is so famous because he also became the editor of the Atlantic Monthly. Remember this, the Atlantic Monthly के वो editor भी बनते हैं. These authors sought to portray the reality of the life. They saw that there are so many intricacies, there are so many real things, and we need to talk about it. So these authors sought to portray life as they saw it, insisting that the ordinary and the local were just as suitable for art as the sublime. So why are you only talking about the heightened self like the transcendentalist or the romantics? Talk about the reality as well. It is as pretty as the transcendentalists talked about the sublime stage. So reality is also pretty. The synthesis of romantic plots and realistic description of settings were also seen when the local color writings were seen. So as I told you, local color, regionalism के साथ-साथ writings लिखी जा रही थी. Literature was focusing on the local color. Their literature that focus on the characters, dialect, customs, topography and other features particular to the specific region was seen. They were exploiting various manners. They were talking about various dresses, various speech habits, various region-specific things were seen in the novels. All the characters were talking about their own region. Okay, like for example, अगर केट चॉपकिन आपकी क्रियोल है, तो वो क्रियोल के जितने लोग हैं उनके बारे में बात कर रही थी. So that is very region specific. Their dressing sense, their way of living. So this is how they are going to talk about themselves. For example, The Awakening by Kate Chopin is such an important work, and in the class I have discussed the summary in detail, and we know how these upper class people were going and living their own lives. So they're talking about their dressing sense, their manners, and it is very region specific also. So that became very, very important. The purpose of these writings was to instruct and to entertain. The character is more important than the plot in the realism, that was in the literature of the realism in America. Subject matter is drawn from real life experiences. The realistics were someone who rejected symbolism and romanticizing the subjects that were there. Settings are usually those familiar to the author, and the plots were there to emphasize on the norms of the daily experience. They were ordinary characters. आप और मेरे जैसे characters लगेंगे, एकदम reality show करते हुए, बहुत ही ज़्यादा heightened sublime self नहीं थे. There are some of the important writers that you should know about realism. We have Stephen Crane, who has written works like The Red Badge of Courage. We have Willa Cather, जिन्होंने O Pioneers और My Antonia जैसे works लिखे हैं. We have Bret Hart, उन्होंने ये work लिखा है Outcast of Poker Flats. These are some important writers. We have Jack London, very important. He has written The Call of the Wild. It's a story of a dog जिनके master को किसी ने मार दिया है and he becomes the leader of the pack of wolves. Okay, then we have Kate Chopin, The Story of an Hour, The Awakening. These are some important works. Then we have Mark Twain. How can we not talk about Mark Twain? Mark Twain ने realistic movements या realism वाले movements जो start होता है अमेरिका में, उसको क्या बोला? That this is the progressive age and the gilded age. He called it as the gilded age. Life on the Mississippi, The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. These are some of the most important works by Mark Twain. So what was the literary style? Uniformity and diversity was seen. They were capturing the commonplace. They were talking about local stories. The writing in the vernacular and the local dialect was seen. So that you, me, everyone living there can relate with the rawness of the works. The other ideologies were what? They were talking about God, government, education, man's purpose of life, American dream. American dream एक बहुत important trope था, एक बहुत important theme है, that was very, very important in almost all the novels. Then we have the evidence of influence as well. So these were the few things. Then comes the naturalistic movement or the naturalism. Now what were the objectives of naturalism? The representation is very objective and whatever they showed on the screen, all the characters were very detached from the life. So it's like a very philosophical manner of doing things. So they are one step ahead than the realistic portrayal of life. The subject matter was very raw, unpleasant experiences which reduced the people to degrading substances in order to survive. So to survive, you are as degraded as possible. So I'll talk about this work. So there is this work by Stephen Crane. So Stephen Crane is associated with naturalism. He is going to write this work, The Red Badge of Courage. Red Badge of Courage के अंदर, it is a story about a soldier who is going he's going to fight, of course, in a civil war. But because of the pathetic situations that he encounters, he just runs away from there. So a soldier who had a work to fight for the nation, he's running away. So what is this naturalistic movement telling you? They will talk about people who can succumb because of the forces of the world. So they will see that because of the degrading situations, people will fail. Setting of commonplace and unheroic portrayal of people would be seen. Novelistic discoveries, qualities of lower class peoples and characters will be compared with the heroes. Suggestion that life on the lowest levels is more complicated. Life of the lower type of people, the marginalized people at the lowest level, when you're not doing good, life आपकी मुश्किल हो जाती है. So ये भी naturalism के अंदर आपको दिखेगा. The man is fundamentally an animal without any free will. It's a very important theme in the naturalistic movement writings. Then it is governed by determinism. वो कौन सी philosophy के बारे में बात करते हैं? Determinism. External and internal forces, environment or hereditary control behaviors are always there. Characters are compensating about the humanistic values and how to affirm it with their own life. Struggle for life becomes heroic and affirms human dignity. There is a very pessimistic view of life or human capabilities. Life is nothing but a trap. We are in a trap. So हमने अभी क्या देखा? We discussed that, and you should remember that the entire American literature can be divided into various parts. There is the Puritan era, the age of reason, romanticism, transcendentalism. Then we have the realism and the naturalism. Then we have modernism and the postmodernism. So ये सारे different eras हैं, and every era will have, or every period that is there will have different characteristics. So in this video, we talked about realism and naturalism, and I also talked about the local color works, the local color novels. So these are the few things that are associated with realism. In the next videos, we can talk about the writers that are associated with realism and naturalism, and we can discuss the works that are written. I hope you understood what realism is and what these writers were talking about. In the next class, we will talk about the number of writers that are there. I hope you liked the video. If you still have any doubt, you can ask me that in the comment section and I'll surely reply to you. Thank you.